Imagine this. You're waiting for important test results. Maybe your stomach's in knots, you've got that cold sweat on your palms, your heart's just hammering against your ribs.
Yeah.
Or think about the last time you saw a really dear friend, someone you hadn't seen in ages, that kind of rush of warmth, right? The automatic smile that just spreads across your face, maybe even tears welling up, but, happy ones.
Absolutely. We've all been there.
In those moments, those really powerful waves of feeling what is actually happening inside your brain and body. It feels so personal, doesn't it? So tied to the specific situation, and yet there's this universal biological engine running underneath it all.
That's a great way to put it. Those experiences feel singular, deeply subjective, and they are in a way. But they're also the result of this incredibly intricate dance between physical states, brain activity, and even how we've learned to interpret the world around us.
Right.
That knot in your stomach, that warm rush, it's not just some kind of metaphor. It's biological reality, and it's really driving the feeling.
Exactly. And that underlying biological reality, that engine, that's what we're putting under the microscope today. This deep dive is all about unpacking the science of feeling. We're exploring what's truly happening moment by moment, and also over the longer term, inside your brain and body when those things we label emotions hit.
Yeah, and we've pulled together a stack of pretty fascinating sources for this. We're looking at the foundational ideas from classic psychology, those theories that first tried to explain the link between your body and your feelings.
The old schools of thought.
Right. Then we'll layer on insights from modern neuroscience, looking at specific brain structures involved. We'll delve into endocrinology as the world of hormones, which provide maybe a slower but really powerful current affecting our emotional states.
Hormones. Yeah.
And we'll even touch on how social context and culture profoundly shape this whole internal experience. It's not just biology in a vacuum.
Definitely not. So our mission today is basically to sift through all these different sources, find the most important insights, those surprising nuggets that make you think differently about what you're feeling, and then connect the dots across these different fields.
Make sense of it all.
Exactly. The goal is to give you a clearer, more informed perspective on this incredible biological and psychological symphony that creates your emotional world. Get ready to understand the mechanics behind the magic, maybe.
Okay, so where do we start? I think defining what we even mean by emotion is probably the place. Because as our sources really emphasize, it's way more complex than just sticking a simple label on it like happy or sad.
It really is, isn't it? We use these single words, but the actual underlying state involves multiple components all working together, often simultaneously. One sort of mechanistic definition our sources offer describes emotion as a positive or negative experience linked to a specific pattern of physiological activity.
Okay. That captures the physical side, the bodily reaction.
All right, but as you said, it's only part of the story.
Exactly. The modern view, the sort of multi-componential view, understands emotion as encompassing several distinct aspects, all happening at once. First, there's the subjective experience, that conscious feeling, the raw, what it feels like to you.
The feeling itself.
The feeling itself, yeah.
And alongside that, you've got the cognitive process, your thoughts, your appraisal of the situation. Are you thinking, this is dangerous or this is wonderful? Your interpretation really matters.
Absolutely. Then you have the expressive behavior, the facial expressions, body posture, the tone of your voice. These are the outward signs how others might perceive your emotion.
And the psychophysiological changes, those internal ones we mentioned at the start. Your heart rate, breathing, skin conductance, muscle tension, those hormonal shifts happening inside.
And finally, there's what's called instrumental behavior, basically, the action you take. What do? Do you freeze? Do you run? Do you reach out to someone? Do you lash out?
Okay, so it's a whole package deal. When you feel fear, say, it's not just the feeling itself in isolation. It's the feeling plus the thought, I'm in danger, plus maybe wide eyes and tense posture, plus the pounding heart and that adrenaline surge, plus the urge to run away. It's all bundled together.
Precisely. And this multi-component understanding is actually kind of resolution to some historical debates in psychology. Early thinkers often focus on just one piece of this puzzle. William James, who I'm sure we'll get to, emphasized the subjective experience and its link to bodily changes.
Right.
Behaviorists, on the other hand, they only wanted to study the observable behavior, what they could see and measure.
Strictly external.
Exactly. And psychophysiologists looked mainly at the physical shifts, the heart rate, the hormones.
But the current consensus, and this is reflected in our sources, is that emotion is really the dynamic interplay and convergence of all these elements. You can't truly understand it by just isolating one component.
right? It's the whole system working together. And the sociological perspective, as noted by researchers like Peggy Thoits, adds another really crucial layer here. Emotions aren't just these internal biological states floating free. They're also shaped profoundly by our social context.
How so?
Well, this includes the cultural labels we apply, anger, surprise, joy, the socially sanctioned expressive actions, how you're allowed or expected to show that feeling, and how we appraise situations based on our social understanding and norms. We learn how to feel and how to express feelings based on the rules of our culture, our upbringing.
That's fascinating. So the feeling itself might be influenced by the label we have for it or the rules about showing it.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
It also touches on another long-standing debate. Can we really separate thinking and feeling? Our sources highlight that cognitive processes like reasoning are often treated as distinct from emotional processes. But many modern theories, especially appraisal theories, argue they are deeply intertwined. Our thoughts constantly influence our feelings, and our feelings definitely influence our thoughts.
It's a feedback loop.
Exactly. And that leads us perfectly into those foundational psychological theories that specifically tried to grapple with this relationship between the body and the feeling. Let's start with William James.
Yes, the James Lange theory. Proposed by William James back in 1884 and also independently by Carl Lange around the same time. This theory really flipped the common sense understanding of emotion on its head in a pretty provocative way.
It really did. The conventional wisdom was, and probably still is for most people, you perceive something, you feel an emotion, and then your body reacts. You see a bear, you feel scared, and then you run. Simple cause and effect.
Seems logical.
James proposed the opposite sequence.
He argued that the feeling, the subjective emotional experience, is actually secondary to the physiological phenomena. The sequence, according to him, is stimulus, seeing the bear, physiological response, your heart races, muscles tense, breath shortens. Then the emotional experience, you perceive those bodily changes and interpret them as fear.
It's a bit mind-bending. James famously put it, we feel sad because we cry, angry because we strike, afraid because we tremble. Not the other way around. You don't cry because you feel sad. You feel sad because you are crying and experiencing all those other bodily changes associated with crying.
Wow. So the feeling is the perception of your body's state. It's radically embodied.
Exactly. It's the embodiment of emotion. Our sources point to some evidence that kind of seems to support this, like studies on the facial feedback hypothesis. You know, the idea that if you force yourself to smile, even when you don't feel happy, you might actually start to feel a subtle shift towards happiness.
I've heard of that, like holding a pencil in your mouth to mimic a smile.
Right, that sort of thing. It suggests that your facial posture, which is a physical state, can indeed influence your subjective emotional feeling, at least a little.
Or what about those power pose studies? The idea that adopting an expansive posture might make you feel more confident, maybe even lower stress hormones?
Yeah, exactly. While some of those findings are debated now, the core idea aligns with James Lange. Manipulating your bodily state can influence your subjective feeling. It suggests the body isn't just passively reacting to the emotion, it's actively contributing to creating it.
This is where it starts to get really interesting for me, this idea that your physical self is so actively involved in generating what feels like a purely mental or psychological state. Your body isn't just a vessel carrying the emotion, it's part of the factory actually producing it.
It's a powerful idea. However, as influential as the James Lange theory was, it definitely faced the significant challenges pretty early on. The main critiques, championed by Walter Bradford Cannon, really questioned its fundamental premise.
Right. Cannon's arguments were quite compelling, weren't they? First, he noted that physiological responses, like changes in heart rate or digestion, they often seem too slow to account for how quickly we feel emotions subjectively. You feel terror the instant you see the snake, not several seconds later when your heart rate has fully ramped up or your digestion slows down.
That's a fair point. A feeling can be almost instantaneous.
And second, and this was perhaps his bigger point, Canning pointed out that the same physiological state can occur with very different emotions. Your heart races when you're scared, yes, but it also races when you're excited or really angry or even just exercising intensely.
The lack of differentiation.
Exactly. If the physiological state is the emotion, how can these really distinct feelings, fear versus excitement, say, arise from what seems like the same pattern of bodily changes?
That's a powerful counterpoint.
Yeah.
If your body reacts the same way to meeting your hero as it does to confronting a bully, How do you know which emotion you're feeling based only on that bodily signal? It doesn't seem specific enough.
Right.
And this led Cannon, along with Philip Bard, to propose an alternative, the Cannon-Bard theory. They agreed that physiological responses were crucial, absolutely, but they didn't believe they caused the subjective feeling in that simple sequential way genes proposed.
So what was their model?
Instead, they proposed that the stimulus, the snake, the exciting news, whatever it is, triggers both the physiological response and the conscious experience of emotion simultaneously. They happen in parallel.
Okay, so not one after the other, but side by side.
Exactly. Their research, which often involved animal studies, pointed to the diencephalon region of the brain, particularly the thalamus, as being like a key relay station. Sensory information comes into the thalamus.
The brain's switchboards, sort of?
Kinda, yeah. And then it gets routed at the same time along two different paths. One pathway goes down to the body, triggering the physiological reaction via the nervous system. The other pathway goes up to the cerebral cortex, where it's processed into the conscious, subjective experience of emotion.
Ah, I see. So in the Cannon-Bard view, you see the snake and the signal splits. Instantly, your body starts preparing to run, and instantly you feel the sensation of fear in your mind. One doesn't cause the other. There are parallel processes kicked off by the same initial event.
Precisely. This theory placed more emphasis on the brain's role as the orchestrator, triggering both components concurrently. It suggested distinct pathways for the body's reaction and the mind's feeling.
So these early theories really set the stage for thinking about the mind-body connection and emotion, even if they weren't perfectly right in their original forms.
Absolutely. While neither the original James Lange nor Cannon-Bard theories are accepted without modification today, they were foundational. James Lange really highlighted the body's contribution to the feeling, emphasizing embodiment. Cannon-Bard highlighted the brain's role in coordinating simultaneous responses, suggesting distinct pathways. The debate they sparked continues to inform modern neuroscience.
And speaking of the body's immediate response, the most dramatic player has got to be our nervous system, right? Specifically, the sympathetic branch, which brings us to everyone's favorite topic, stress.
Indeed, your built-in ancient alarm system. We're talking about the fight-or-flight response, or more formally, the acute stress response. It's a fundamental physiological reaction to any perceived threat, whether that threat is, a saber-toothed tiger back in the day, or giving a public speech, or even just opening a scary email today.
It feels the same sometimes.
It can. The purpose is primal. Mobilize the body's resources for immediate, intense physical action, either to fight the threat head-on or flee from it to safety. It's a system designed for these short bursts of survival energy.
And Hans Selye, didn't he map this out, the general adaptation syndrome?
That's right. Selye, a real pioneer in stress research, described this initial mobilization as the alarm stage. His syndrome maps the body's response to stress over time. First the alarm, then resistance, where the body tries to adapt and normalize, and finally, if the stress is prolonged and overwhelming, exhaustion.
So let's break down that alarm phase. What's the biological cascade? How does it actually work when that threat hits?
Okay, it starts with your brain, specifically a region called the hypothalamus, perceiving a threat, real or imagined. This perception immediately triggers the sympathetic nervous system. Think of it as flipping the emergency switch.
Right, the accelerator pedal.
Exactly. That nerve activation then leads to the rapid release of stress hormones. The hypothalamus releases something called CRH, corticotropin-releasing hormone, which signals the pituitary gland, another part of the brain, to release ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. ACTH then travels through your bloodstream down to the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of your kidneys.
So it's a chain reaction. Hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals, the HPA axis.
Precisely, the HPA axis working alongside this sympathetic nervous system activation. The adrenal glands are the real action heroes here. They pump out catecholamines like adrenaline, also called epinephrine, and noradrenaline, norepinephrine. These cause those immediate rapid physical changes, the pounding heart, the quick breathing.
The jolt.
The jolt, exactly. And they also release cortisol, which is a steroid hormone. Cortisol has more sustained effects, keeping the system mobilized.
And these hormones, driven by the sympathetic nervous system, orchestrate this whole series of physical changes, right? Each designed for survival.
Absolutely. Your pupils dilate, for instance. Why? To let in more light, improving your vision so you can better assess the threat or find an escape route.
Makes sense. And the heart rate and breathing skyrocket.
Right, and that's not arbitrary. It's to pump more oxygenated blood to your major muscles, your arms and legs, and also to your brain, fueling them for action and keeping you mentally sharp, focused.
You might feel lightheaded, or your skin might go pale or get flushed. What's that about?
That's blood being redistributed. It's shunted away from less essential areas at that moment, like your skin surface or your digestive system, and directed towards the big muscles in your limbs, ready for running or fighting. Your blood also increases its clotting ability, pretty useful if you're actually facing physical danger and got injured mid-escape.
Wow. Evolution thought of everything.
Pretty much. And your muscles tense up, they get primed for exertion, which can sometimes cause visible trembling or shaking. Your senses might feel heightened. You might feel this surge of almost manic energy. And interestingly, your perception of pain can temporarily decrease.
Adrenaline rush covering pain.
Exactly. All systems go for survival.
And we experience this constantly in modern life, often without any real physical danger. That feeling of dread before a presentation, the frantic energy trying to meet a deadline, that's your body running a fight or flight simulation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Which raises that important question. How does this ancient system, optimized for escaping predators on the savannah, impact us now, when the threat is more likely a demanding boss, financial worries, or just an overflowing inbox?
And that's where the problems really start to arise, right? While it's incredibly beneficial in truly acute, dangerous situations, our bodies often can't tell the difference between a tiger and a toxic email chain.
Unfortunately, no. The fight or flight response can be triggered just as strongly by purely psychological threats. Things like phobias, social anxiety, chronic worry about the future, even just anticipating something bad happening.
So someone with a fear of heights might experience a full-blown panic attack just looking out a window on the 10th floor, even though they're perfectly safe behind glass.
Precisely. Their body is reacting as if they're about to fall. The perception of threat is enough to trigger the entire cascade.
And the chronic activation of this system, constantly flooding your body with cortisol and adrenaline, that can't be good long-term.
It's incredibly damaging. Our sources consistently link the chronic stress response to a whole host of health issues. Persistent fatigue, digestive problems like IBS or ulcers, tension headaches, chronic muscle pain, suppression of the immune system, which makes you more prone to infections and illness.
The list goes on.
It does. Metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, increased risk of heart attack and stroke. The physical toll is significant.
And it doesn't just affect the body, right?
Yeah.
What about mental health?
Hugely impacts mental health. Chronic stress is a major contributor to anxiety disorders, depression, problems with concentration and memory. That feeling of your brain being foggy or unable to focus when you're under constant pressure, that's partly the neurochemical effect of chronic stress.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And some research even suggests that having a highly reactive fight or flight system might increase your susceptibility to developing conditions like PTSD after experiencing a traumatic event. It's a powerful system, essential for survival, but it's really ill-suited for the constant, low-grade psychological grind many people experience today.
Okay, so the nervous system handles the immediate rapid response, mobilizing the body, but the brain is where a lot of the processing, the interpretation, the regulation of these emotional signals happens. There must be key brain areas involved.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most famous, especially when we talk about threat and fear, is the amygdala. It's this small almond-shaped structure located deep within the temporal lobe of the brain. You can think of it as our built-in risk detector or alarm bell.
The almond of fear.
Kind of. Our sources describe the amygdala as a really crucial structure for understanding how mammals, including us, generate behavioral responses to danger. It rapidly assesses incoming sensory information sites, sounds, smells, looking for potential threats.
So it's constantly scanning.
Pretty much.
Oh.
And if it detects something potentially dangerous, it springs into action, coordinating rapid physiological and behavioral responses. It talks to other brain areas and helps trigger those nervous system and hormonal cascades.
Yeah.
We just discussed the HPA axis, the adrenaline release.
And this happens fast.
Very fast. Often before you even have a conscious awareness of what the specific threat is, it's getting your body ready just in case.
So it's primarily about fear.
While the amygdala is strongly associated with processing fear, aversive stimuli, and fear conditioning, it's probably more accurate to say it's involved in broader threat processing and evaluating the emotional significance of incoming information in general. That can include positive or rewarding stimuli too. But its role in detecting threats and initiating defensive responses is definitely its most well-known and critical function.
Okay, but emotion isn't just about detecting danger and reacting instantly. There's also evaluation, decision-making, maybe calming down that initial response. That sounds like higher brain functions.
Exactly. And that's where the prefrontal cortex, PFC, comes into play.
Yeah.
This is the area at the very front of your brain, right behind your forehead. It's involved in all sorts of higher-level executive functions, planning, decision-making, working memory, impulse control, and critically for our discussion, emotional regulation.
The brain CEO, maybe?
In some ways, yeah. And research has revealed some fascinating links between different parts of the PFC and how we process and respond to emotional stimuli. For example, numerous studies have shown that the left prefrontal cortex tends to become more active when people experience stimuli that elicit positive emotions or, maybe more accurately, motivate and approach behavior.
Approach behavior, like moving towards something.
Exactly. So if you see something that makes you feel good and makes you want to engage with it, maybe a picture of a delicious meal when you're hungry, or you're anticipating seeing a friend you like, the left side of your PFC tends to light up.
Interesting.
Yeah, and some experiments have even shown that artificially stimulating this area can make people rate neutral stimuli more positively. It's almost like that side of the brain is associated with a, yes, move towards this signal.
So this led researchers to test different models of how the PFC organizes emotions, right? Like positive versus negative.
Correct. One early model, the valence model, was pretty simple. It predicted that all negative emotions would activate the right PFC and all positive emotions would activate the left PFC. A straightforward good-bad split.
Seems intuitive enough.
But then another model, the direction model, proposed something slightly different. It suggested the key distinction wasn't simply positive versus negative, but approach versus withdrawal or avoidance. It predicted that any emotion that makes you want to move towards something would activate the left PFC, and any emotion that makes you want to move away or avoid something would activate the right PFC.
Okay, approach versus withdrawal. How do they test that?
Well, an emotion like anger becomes a really fascinating test case here. Anger is generally considered a negative emotion, right?
Definitely feels negative most of the time.
Right. So according to the valence model, anger should activate the right PFC. But anger often involves an approach tendency. You might move towards the person or situation you're angry with. You want to confront it. So according to the direction model, anger should activate the left PFC.
Ah, a conflict between the models. So what did the studies find?
Consistently, studies showed that anger, despite being subjectively negative, tended to activate the left prefrontal cortex. This provided strong support for the direction model over the simple valence model. It suggests that the left PFC isn't just the happy side, it's more like the approach side or the engagement side.
That's a really interesting nuance. It's about the action tendency, not just the feeling.
Exactly. But then it raises the question, what is the opposite of approach? This led to yet another refinement, sometimes called the action tendency model. Is the opposite of approach simply moving away, withdrawing? Or could it be more nuanced, like actively resisting something, or perhaps passively yielding or freezing?
Different ways to disengage.
Right. And the evidence, as our sources suggest, seems to point towards passive yielding or behavioral inhibition being linked more strongly to right prefrontal activity. Think about feelings associated with shyness, or that feeling of being overwhelmed and freezing up. That kind of passive, withdrawing, inhibiting tendency seems associated with activity in the right PFC.
So left PFC for approach engagement. Right, PFC may be more for passive withdrawal inhibition.
That seems to be the direction the research points. What's fascinating here is how these different regions of the prefrontal cortex aren't just processing whether a feeling is good or bad, but they seem fundamentally linked to how that feeling prepares your body and mind for action, whether to engage and approach, to avoid and withdraw, or maybe to freeze and yield. It really shows how closely intertwined emotional processing is with preparing for behavior.
Okay, so we've got the rapid-fire nervous system kicking things off, the brain areas like the amygdala and PFC processing and directing the response. But you mentioned another major system influencing our emotional states, often working on a slower time scale.
Yes, the hormonal symphony, as you called it earlier. Hormones. These are part of the endocrine system, and they act as biochemical messengers that travel through your bloodstream.
So not as fast as nerve signals.
Generally much slower, but their effects can be much longer lasting. Unlike nerve signals, which are fast and targeted, hormones circulate throughout the body and can reach distant organs and tissues, including the brain, influencing their function for minutes, hours, maybe even longer.
And our sources highlight their role in emotional regulation.
Absolutely. They're instrumental, acting as a crucial bridge between the body's ongoing physiological state and our emotional expression and subjective experience. They add another layer of complexity and influence.
Okay, so let's dive into some key players in this hormonal symphony. We already touched on the HPA axis and cortisol with fight or flight.
Right, but let's revisit it specifically in the context of emotional regulation and disorders. The HPA axis and cortisol are absolutely central to the stress response and its long-term impact on emotion. Remember, HPA stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's the main command chain for the stress response.
Hypothalamus signals pituitary, pituitary signals adrenals.
And the adrenals release cortisol. Now, in the short term, cortisol is adaptive. It boosts glucose levels for energy, enhances the brain's use of that glucose to keep you sharp under pressure, and dials down non-essential functions like the immune system or digestion to conserve resources for the immediate challenge.
Survival mode stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But here's where the bigger picture, especially for chronic emotion and mood, comes in. If that HPA axis is constantly activated because of chronic stress, that relentless stream of work deadlines, financial worries, relationship conflicts, whatever it is, then your cortisol levels remain persistently high.
And that's the problem.
That's the big problem. Chronically elevated cortisol is really detrimental to both cognitive function and emotional health. It can actually damage neurons in the hippocampus, a brain area critical for learning and memory, leading to difficulties in those areas. It affects attention, decision-making,
And mood.
definitely mood. It directly worsens mood and significantly increases your vulnerability to developing clinical anxiety disorders and major depression. It's considered a major biological pathway linking chronic stress to mental illness.
And people react differently, don't they? Some people seem much more stressed out by the same situation than others.
That's a crucial point.
Yeah.
Individual variability in HPA axis reactivity. Our sources note that people differ significantly in how sensitive their HPA axis is to stressors. This can be influenced by genetics. Some people might just be genetically predisposed to have a more reactive stress response system.
Born warriors.
Maybe partly, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also heavily influenced by early life experiences. Things like childhood trauma, chronic adversity, or insecure attachment can actually program the HPA axis to be hyperreactive or dysregulated later in life. Your environment shapes your stress biology.
That makes sense. It helps explain why some people seem more resilient, bounce back easier, while others are more susceptible to the negative effects of stress, maybe developing PTSD or depression after similar experiences.
Exactly. Understanding your own HPA axis response style, though complex, is pretty key to understanding your personal stress vulnerability and resilience.
Okay, so cortisol is the big stress hormone. What else is in this hormonal symphony affecting emotions?
Well, beyond the direct stress response, other hormones play significant roles. The gonadal hormones, like estrogen and progesterone in women, and testosterone primarily in men, are well known for their links to mood and anxiety levels.
Right, people talk about hormonal mood swings.
And there's a biological basis for it. Fluctuations in these hormones across the lifespan are clearly associated with mood changes. Think about the links often discussed between premenstrual syndrome, PMS, postpartum depression, or mood shifts during menopause in women, or the potential effects of declining testosterone levels on mood and energy in aging men. These hormones have receptors in brain areas that are directly involved in regulating mood and emotion.
What about other systems?
Thyroid hormones are also really important. Both too little thyroid hormone, hypothyroidism, and too much hyperthyroidism are frequently associated with significant mood disorders like depression and also anxiety. Getting thyroid function checked and regulated is often a crucial step in managing those kinds of symptoms.
Okay, now what about this one I hear a lot about, oxytocin, the bonding hormone?
Ah, yes, oxytocin. It's a really fascinating one, often called the cuddle chemical or love hormone. It's released during social bonding behaviors, things like gentle touch, intimacy, breastfeeding, even just cooperative social interaction. It plays a critical role in forming and maintaining social connections.
So mother-infant bonding, romantic partners.
Absolutely. Central to maternal bonding, pair bonding between partners, and also promoting trust, cooperation, and cohesion within larger groups. Its release seems to make social interactions feel more rewarding and less threatening. It can reduce feelings of social anxiety and foster a sense of contentment, safety, and security in relationships.
And it affects trust. How does that work?
Its effect on trust is particularly compelling and well-studied. Experiments have shown that administering oxytocin, like through a nasal spray, can increase people's willingness to trust others, even complete strangers, and even in situations where there's a real financial risk or a known possibility of betrayal.
Wow, really? How?
The thinking is that it acts on key brain circuits involved in both fear processing, like the amygdala, and reward processing. It seems to essentially lower our natural defensive guard, reducing the automatic threat assessment we might make about unfamiliar people, making social risk feel less intimidating, and perhaps enhancing the rewarding feeling of connection. It's like a chemical facilitator of social approach and cooperation.
That's pretty amazing, a hormone for trust.
It's complex, but yeah, it plays a big role. And even hormones linked to our most basic biological drives like hunger and satiety have surprising connections to our emotional landscape. Think about the metabolic hormones like leptin and ghrelin.
Leptin is the full signal, right?
So,
And ghrelin is hungry.
broadly, yes. Leptin is produced by your fat tissue, and it signals to your brain that you're full, that you have sufficient energy stores. But what's interesting is that receptors for leptin are found not just in appetite centers, but also in brain regions, heavily involved in mood and reward processing.
So it's doing more than just controlling hunger.
It seems so. Low leptin levels, which can happen during strict dieting or starvation, are often linked to reduced motivation, increased irritability, maybe even depressive symptoms. And conversely, leptin resistance, which is common in obesity where the brain stops responding properly to the leptin signal, has been linked to depressive-like behaviors in animal models. There's even some early research exploring whether leptin might have antidepressant properties.
Huh. And ghrelin, the hunger hormone.
Right. Ghrelin is produced mainly in the stomach when it's empty, and it signals hunger to the brain. It definitely promotes appetite, and it's also linked to stress-induced eating, that common urge to reach for comfort food when you're feeling stressed out. Ghrelin might be playing a role there, perhaps by making food seem more rewarding under stress.
Okay, but how does that connect to mood beyond stress eating?
Well, here's the intriguing part. Despite its link to stress eating, ghrelin has actually shown some unexpected anxiolytic, meaning anxiety-reducing, and antidepressant-like effects in animal studies. It seems to promote resilience to stress in some contexts.
That seems paradoxical.
It does. It raises this really important question. How do these hormones, which clearly evolved primarily to manage our basic energy balance, end up having such a profound influence on our mood, our anxiety levels, our response to stress? It really highlights the deep intertwined nature of our fundamental biological needs like eating and our complex emotional states. They're not separate systems.
Body and mind really are connected at every level.
Absolutely. And finally, let's touch on a nutrient that functions very much like a hormone and is getting increasing attention for its role in brain health and mood: vitamin D.
The sunshine vitamin.
That's the one. Often synthesized in our skin when exposed to sunlight, but also obtained from some foods and supplements. What's key is that vitamin D receptors are found throughout the brain, including in areas critical for mood regulation.
And deficiency is linked to mood problems.
Increasingly, yes. Low levels of vitamin D are correlated with a higher risk of mood disorders, particularly depression and seasonal affective disorder, SAD, but also anxiety and general cognitive difficulties. It seems to have neuroprotective effects. It influences neurotransmitter activity and plays a role in brain plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and change.
So getting enough sun or supplementing could potentially help mood.
It's an active area of research. The links are strong enough that exploring whether vitamin D supplementation could be a useful adjunctive treatment, meaning alongside other therapies for some mood disorders, is definitely happening.
Yeah.
It just broadens our understanding of emotional biology to include factors we might not immediately think of, like sunshine exposure and nutrition.
Okay, wow. So we've covered a lot of biology. The immediate nervous system, fight or flight, the brain areas processing and directing like the amygdala and PFC, and this whole complex hormonal symphony providing a slower but powerful influence. But you said earlier, biology isn't the whole story. Our thoughts, our social world, they're not just spectators.
Not at all. They're active participants, profoundly shaping what and how we feel. Biology provides the raw materials, the potential, but interpretation and context are key. This is where cognitive appraisal comes in.
Appraisal meaning how we judge or interpret a situation.
Exactly. Theories like Joseph Forgas's appraisal tendency theory suggest that individuals develop habitual, almost automatic ways of appraising or interpreting situations. We assess their personal relevance, their desirability, their significance for our goals, often without even consciously thinking about it.
Like wearing emotional glasses.
Kind of. These ingrained ways of seeing the world, these appraisal tendencies, don't just influence how we think. They directly shape our emotional responses to events and even our social judgments. If you tend to appraise ambiguous situations as potentially threatening, you're naturally more likely to experience anxiety or fear in those situations. If you tend to appraise setbacks as challenges to overcome, you might feel frustration, but also determination, rather than despair.
So our thinking habits influence our feeling habits.
Very much so. Nico Frida's laws of emotion also really emphasize the role of appraisal. His laws propose things like emotions are triggered by events that matter to us personally, law of situational meaning. They fundamentally concern our well-being, law of concern. They are based on how we evaluate the situation relative to our goals and concerns, law of appraisal. They prepare us for specific actions, law of readiness, and they involve our expectations about what might happen, law of concerned expectancy. He really saw emotions as adaptive signals arising from our personal evaluation of the world.
So the emotion isn't just a direct, automatic biological output triggered by some external event. It's heavily mediated by how your brain, informed by your personality, your history, your current goals, interprets that event.
Precisely. The meaning you make matters immensely.
And this interpretation process, it's not happening in a vacuum, right? You mentioned the social and cultural layer earlier.
Exactly. That interpretation process is heavily influenced by the social and cultural layer. Lisa Feldman Barrett's theory of constructed emotion takes a particularly strong stance here. She argues that emotions aren't simply triggered by events, like flipping a switch, but are actively created or constructed by the brain in the moment.
Created. How?
Her theory proposes that this construction process involves the brain integrating signals from multiple sources. The raw sensory input from the world, signals about your body's internal physical state, your heart rate, your gut feelings interoception, your past experiences and memories related to similar situations, and the social and cultural concepts you've learned.
So culture provides the concepts.
Yes, your culture provides the concepts and the language. The emotion words like anger, joy, disgust that your brain uses to make sense of, to categorize, that complex blend of bodily signals, external context, and past experience.
So without the cultural concept of anger, maybe learned from your parents or society, how would you categorize that specific feeling state, the racing heart, the flushed face, the appraisal of being wronged?
You might feel something intensely unpleasant and activating, sure, but you wouldn't necessarily label, understand, and experience it as anger in the specific way someone raised in a culture with that well-defined concept does. The concept helps shape the experience itself.
Wow, that's a powerful idea that language and culture actually help build the emotion.
It is, and the sociology of emotions elaborates on this further. It sees emotions as involving physiological changes, yes, but these are always interpreted and expressed according to cultural norms and rules. Sociologists talk about feeling rules.
Ringing rules.
Yeah, these are basically the unspoken social conventions that regulate how and when it's considered appropriate to experience and especially express certain emotions. Think about the different expectations around expressing grief at a funeral versus joy at a wedding across different cultures.
Or even within a culture, right? Like gender differences.
Absolutely. Think about historical or even current societal expectations around men expressing anger versus sadness, or women expressing sadness versus anger. These rules can influence not just what people show, but potentially, over time, what they allow themselves to feel or how they interpret their own internal states.
And institutions rely on this too.
For sure. Social institutions are often built around shared emotional understandings. Think about romantic love as the idealized basis for marriage in many Western cultures. Or think about the deliberate use of emotional appeals, fear, hope, patriotism in political campaigns, or advertising to motivate people.
This is where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? The feelings you experience aren't just some raw, pure biological output. They're constantly being filtered, labeled, understood, managed, and shaped by the social world you live in and the rules you've implicitly absorbed.
Exactly. The same underlying physical state, say, high arousal could be constructed and experienced as ecstatic joy at a concert, or terrifying panic during an exam, depending heavily on the context, your appraisal, and the cultural framework you're using.
Okay, this is incredibly broad. Before we try to wrap this up, is there anything else crucial from the sources?
Yeah.
What about memory?
Ah, yes, good point. It's where the brief mention of the powerful link between emotions and memory. Our sources consistently remind us that emotion significantly influences how our autobiographical memories, the memories of our own life events, are formed, stored, and later retrieved.
Emotional memories stick better.
Generally, yes. Highly emotional events, whether positive or negative, tend to be encoded more strongly and are often more easily and vividly recalled later compared to neutral events. This is partly because the amygdala, our threat salience detector, is active during emotional events and seems to work with the hippocampus, the main memory center, to tag those experiences for stronger consolidation. They get prioritized.
So our strongest memories are often our most emotional ones.
Often, yes. This has profound implications, of course. It means our past is largely remembered through an emotional lens. It affects how we remember our successes and failures, shaping our ongoing self-perception, influencing our future emotional reactions in similar situations, and potentially reinforcing certain emotional patterns or biases over time. Memory and emotion are deeply intertwined.
Right. Putting all of this together then, the early theories grappling with the body and mind, the rapid nervous system response, the specific brain areas doing the processing, the whole hormonal soup influencing things, the critical role of cognitive interpretation, the social and cultural shaping, the link to memory. It becomes incredibly clear that you really can't understand emotions by looking through just one lens.
Absolutely not. You truly need an interdisciplinary approach. You need insights from psychology, from neuroscience, from biology and endocrinology, from sociology, even from philosophy, to grapple with the nature of subjective experience.
And this knowledge isn't just theoretical, sitting in labs or books. It has real-world applications everywhere.
Everywhere. Psychiatry and clinical psychology rely on it to understand and treat emotional dysregulation in mood disorders, anxiety, PTSD. Nursing and medicine need to understand how stress and emotion impact physical health and recovery. Economics is increasingly incorporating emotion to understand consumer behavior and financial decision-making behavioral economics.
Criminology looks at the role of emotion in behavior. Law considers state of mind. Political science analyzes voter emotions.
Even computer science is getting in on the act with effective computing, trying to develop systems that can recognize, interpret, and even respond to human emotions. It's just a testament to how utterly fundamental emotions are to the human experience itself. They really are the engine, the compass, and maybe the color palette of our lives.
Okay, let's try and bring this very deep dive into the science of feeling to a close then. We've journeyed from those earliest ideas trying to pin down the link between the body and the feeling.
Through the rapid, almost instantaneous response of the nervous system, the fight-or-flight mechanism, and the critical processing hubs in the brain, like the amygdala acting as a detector and the prefrontal cortex trying to manage and direct.
We delved into that slower but incredibly powerful background influence of hormones, cortisol driving the stress response, oxytocin fostering connection, even those metabolic signals like ghrelin and leptin surprisingly tying into mood.
And finally, we explored how crucial our own thoughts, our cognitive appraisals, our interpretations, and the social and cultural world we're embedded in are in shaping, labeling, and constructing our subjective emotional experiences.
So the core message really is that emotions are not simple, single things. They are incredibly complex phenomena. They emerge from this dynamic, constant interplay between our physical biology, the intricate wiring and chemistry of our brain, our nervous system, our hormones, and our interpretation and understanding of the world around us.
And that interpretation is profoundly shaped by our individual experiences, our personal history, the culture we live in, the language we use.
They aren't just abstract feelings floating in your head. They are deeply embodied states. They have tangible physical underpinnings, but they're filtered through all these layers of personal meaning and social context.
And grasping this, even just beginning to grasp the complexity, can be truly empowering, don't you think? When you feel overwhelmed by stress, recognizing it's not just in your head, but involves a real, measurable HPA axis cascade and a physiological fight-or-flight response. That can change how you approach managing it. Maybe you focus on calming the body first.
Right, or understanding how cultural feeling rules might be influencing how you express or don't express an emotion could help you navigate social situations or understand why others react differently than you might expect.
Appreciating the link between hormones and mood might shed light on frustrating or confusing emotional shifts, maybe prompting a check-in with a doctor rather than just self-blame. It provides a kind of scientific lens, a different framework through which to view your own inner landscape.
It gives us a new language, maybe a more nuanced language, for something that feels so intensely personal and often, well, kind of ineffable.
Which leaves us with a final, maybe provocative thought for you to mull over as you reflect on your own feelings today and going forward. If our emotions are, to such a significant extent, the result of these biochemical reactions, these specific patterns of brain activity, these learned interpretations shaped by our environment, our culture, and even our genetic predispositions, How much true independent agency do we really have over how we feel in any given moment?
That's a big question.
It is. And what does this intricate, multi-layered science suggest are the most effective paths, the best strategies for fostering emotional well-being, for cultivating resilience in the face of life's inevitable challenges and complexities? Where does our power truly lie in navigating this complex inner world?
Something to think about on your own deep dive. Thanks for joining us today.
Until next time.